Alright guys, today we're going to talk about solving one-step equations. This should be a review for you, so we're going to go over some of the basics here. First of all, how to solve a one-step equation. You need to make sure you always solve by doing the opposite operation. So if it says add, you need to subtract. If it says subtract, you need to add. Same thing with multiplication, you got to make sure you're always doing the opposite. And you need to make sure you always solve by performing the same operation on both sides of the equation. The reason for this is because in future courses in Algebra 1 and Algebra 2, your problems are going to get so long that if you don't know how to solve on both sides of the equal sign, it's going to cause problems. So, sorry guys, no more doing work in your head. I need to see all the steps. So let's look at a couple of problems here. In the first problem, I have b plus 3 9/10 equals 0 7/10. Well, here's my equal sign. It's almost like a road there. And I see that I'm adding 3 9/10 to b. My ultimate goal here is to get the variable, in this case the b, by itself. It says I'm adding 3 9/10, so I want to subtract 3 9/10. Why? Because a positive 3 9/10 and a negative 3 9/10 gives me 0. Well, if I'm subtracting from one side, I need to subtract from the other side of the equal sign. Now, as I said, a positive 3.9 and a negative 3.9 is actually going to get me 0. So I would have b plus 0 here. Now, do I really need that b plus 0? No, I can just put b. But now I can add my 3.9 and my 0.7. However, notice it's a negative 3.9, so I actually need to subtract. 9 minus 7 is going to get me 2. 3 minus 0 is going to get me 3. Bring down my decimal, because you line up the dot and give it all you got. The 3 9/10 is bigger, so it's actually going to be a negative answer. Now let's look at the second problem. X minus 18 equals 36 6/10. Again, I'm going to kind of draw my road for my equal sign so that I know I have to do something on both sides. It says minus 18, so I'm going to do the opposite, and I'm going to add 18. Make sure you line up the dot, and when there's no decimal, it's always at the end of the number because I don't want to change my number. I can add a 0 if that helps. Now, a negative 18 and a positive 18 gives me 0, so that would be the same as x plus 0, but x plus 0 is just x. A lot of your elementary teachers would have taught you something like this where they cancel each other out. Now, 36 6/10 and 18 are both positive, so we add them together. 6 plus 0 is 6. Line up your dot. 6 plus 8 is 14. Carry 1, and then that gives us 5. So our final answer there is x equals 54 6/10. Now let's look at this here. I've got a multiplication problem and a division problem. I have negative 6 3/10 times y equals negative 8 19/10. Well, the opposite of multiplying is dividing, so I'm going to divide by negative 6 3/10. And whatever I do to one side of my road, I have to do to the other side, so negative 6 3/10. Well guys, I can't do that in my head. And since we're not using calculators quite yet, I'm going to come over here, 8 19/100 divided by 6 3/10. Now, no decimals outside the house, so I bring it over 1, and then bring that straight up. Now 63 will go into 81 one time, subtracting you get 63. Or multiplying, you get 63. We need to subtract that. We'll bring that to a 7. 11 minus 3 is 8. 7 minus 6 is 1. Bring down your 9. Well, 63 and 189. So how many times does 63 go into 189? Well, 63 is about 60. 189 is about 190. Knock off those zeros. Okay, so 60 will go into 19 about 3 times. So let's try out the 3 there. 3 times 3 is 9. 3 times 6 is 18. Oh, hey, look, that actually worked perfect. Had it been too high, I would have gone down 1. Had it been too low, I would have gone up 1. But that actually works out perfect. So y equals 1 3/10. Now I look back at my signs to double check. I have 2 negatives, so my answer will be positive here. So let's look at this final problem. M divided by -3 6/10 equals 0 12/100. So I'm going to multiply here, since it says divide, I'm going to multiply on both sides by -3 6/10. Now technically I could look at this as a fraction and put it over 1. And what's going to happen, if you remember our cross simplifying last week, I can actually divide here and cross those out, so that I'm actually just left with m over 1, or just m. But whatever I do to one side of my equation, I have to do to the other, so I multiply by -3 6/10 over here. So I can't do that in my head again, so 0.12 times 3.6. Notice I don't have to line up my decimals when multiplying decimals. 6 times 2 is 12. 6 times 1 is 6, plus 1 is 7. Put down a 0 because I'm moving to the tens place. 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 1 is 3. Add those together. That's 2, 13, 4. And I have got 1, 2, 3 decimal places in my problem. So I will have 1, 2, 3 decimal places in my answer. Now, if you have any questions about any of the problems I worked out, please make sure to write these down in your notebook, and I will be happy to answer them tomorrow in class. Thanks, guys. Have a good night.